Thank you for tuning in to the Worldbuilder's Anvil, episode 180. A very special episode because it is Michael's 100th episode.
Michael?
Yeah, what's up?
That was last week.
What?
You started at episode 79, not 80.
So this one isn't my
that was last week.
100th. Well, how come we didn't make a big deal out of it?
Every episode with you is like an eternity.
You're supposed to say like a ray of sunshine.
Like an Elysium positive one, obviously.
Today's topic, the everyman with a secret. Yours and my favorite superhero. And we came to ask, how does a teenage boy manage to stick around for so long? Today we're talking about Spider-Man.
Thank God.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the Worldbuilder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, I'm the painful co-host of the Worldbuilder's Anvil.
And I'm the better looking one, Michael Miller.
That's a lie. I want people to go to Twitter right now.
Everything I say is the truth, and everything he says is lies.
I want to go to Twitter or the Facebook group right now and say, based off of this audio episode, which of us is better looking? Yes, you know, sort of in happy delight to the coming of Spider-Man Homecoming. I was inspired to talk about Spider-Man because he is, in my opinion, one of the best characters in all of fiction.
And I like that they are rebooting the character's franchise in the movie world, and they're putting him at his appropriate age
that's
bracket.
always been my problem.
And with a star that is approximately that age.
And I know why. Like, it's like typically in the movies that they typically go either Peter Parker in college or Peter Parker even post-college in wonderful 70s documentary style footage of Spider-Man.
Well, don't forget, even in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man verse, we started in high school.
We did?
Oh, yes.
I forgot that.
Yeah, which was, well, it was short, but we did start in high school, and it just seemed kind of weird because, like, Tobey Maguire's my age.
Yeah.
So.
That's really old for the people out there, which I probably shouldn't say since I'm actually older. But I look younger.
I thought they did a good job of shoehorning him into a high school crowd, but I find Peter Parker is his most approachable at his earliest years. Like,
that's what makes him the character that stands the time, is him in his high school years. And the thing was, I think with the Sam Raimi's, they didn't focus enough, maybe a little bit in the first movie, but they really got away from that in the later movies. And I just want to put this in a bit of perspective. There's been 9 movies, including Spider-Man, since 2002.
9.
And that's just live action. I'm sure there have probably been some cartoon movies as well, too. But those are feature films.
Yep, I think so.
You know, between the Avengers and the different Spider-Man reboots and all of this stuff. And at first, when they announced a new Spider-Man reboot again, I was a bit concerned. I'm like, oh, again? And then, you know, when they revealed this kid, obviously, was it during Civil War? Or no, it was like during the end of an Iron Man movie. You're like, wow, this kid is Peter Parker.
Civil War was his appearance.
Well, that was his first actual in the movie, but I think he was in a trailer for like the last Iron Man or something like that.
Was he?
Or maybe it was Avengers, the first Avengers, something like that. He made a quick appearance at the end.
Are you talking about his appearance at the airport?
I think what happened was at the end of one of the movies, one of the Marvel movies, Tony Stark went into Peter Parker's house.
Oh, you're talking about the post-credit scene.
Just the post-credit scene. Yeah.
Okay, yes. That was Iron Man.
Yeah, so that was a lovely little scene.
Or no. That was.
I think it was a different one.
That was.
That had both.
It was an Avengers movie. Had to have been.
Yeah, maybe it was the first Avengers movie. I forget. I'm not the lexicon person that other people are, which will get me flailed on Twitter later. Excellent. And but obviously he's been on countless TV shows, both animated and live action, and a couple different comic books. He's had more comic book titles than some comic book runs have. So
I would highly, highly, highly recommend a short run. I think it was only 2 seasons of Spider-Man that I think was put out by MTV. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man was voiced by Neil Patrick Harris.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen this on like Netflix or something.
Mary Jane Parker was voiced by Lisa Loeb. Okay. And Ian Ziering voiced Harry, Spider-Man's best friend.
I just didn't realize that was actually an MTV production, I guess. So
I'm pretty sure it was. I could be remembering that wrong. I have it all on DVD, and they cut it after 2 seasons, which was bothersome because they left it at a cliffhanger. But really great production value, really good characters, really good performances. I highly recommend if you want an animated Spider-Man show in your life to go look that one out. And for a long time it was on Netflix. I don't know if it still is.
It definitely was. I haven't had Netflix in a while, but it definitely is on there, or was. Now, I'd say my first memory, and the reason Spider-Man's probably, up there with Batman is my favorite superhero. A better character than Batman, but maybe not quite as favorite as a superhero. I don't know. I think he's a better character, and we'll go into why in this episode.
I might argue that one.
Well, it's from the point I'm arguing, which is the reason that he's still around and been around for so long. It's because he's so identifiable. But
Oh, I see. Okay, if you're going at it from
a certain perspective, and you could definitely argue Batman is a better character, maybe more developed. You could argue that kind of stuff all day, but we'll argue from a point of view where I'm correct and you're wrong, and we'll just save the argument.
Fair enough.
Okay. But he was introduced to me probably. I don't know if before the old Batman TV show was probably in reruns at the point. I don't know, but I was a kid. But it was on Electric Company when I was a young child. It was one of the shows that my mom allowed me to watch. And it was sort of my introduction to superheroes. And like, what is this? And, back in the days before there was internet and before, you start talking about Spider-Man with your friends. But he was, in a way, because of the Electric Company, introduced to me at a very early age and why I prefer that show over Sesame Street.
I wonder how they managed to do that. Like, did they just ask Marvel, hey, can we borrow your guy and put him in?
They would have had to, because, it was definitely intellectual property infringement if they did not. But I'm sure they had some agreement with Marvel, and it was smart, too, because you think about it, it's sort of like a teaser. And then later on, when you get a little bit older and you see the comic books, you're like, oh, that's Spider-Man. And you start reading the comics. Mm-hmm. So it was a smart decision.
And don't forget, he also played a part in the Sunday papers.
I don't remember.
He, I think, still has a little strip that Spider-Man does.
Those kind of vary from town to town and paper to paper. I don't really remember that. But I don't know. I'll take your word for it because you're usually right.
My very first probably would have been my very first comic book was a Spider-Man comic book. Now, this was before being a comic book collector. This is just being a young child, and somebody got me a comic book. My first comic book was Spider-Man. My brother's first comic book was Casper the Friendly.
Well, that makes you cooler.
And it does, which is why I mention it and point out that I am cooler. We later had a small collection of comic books, maybe 10 to 20 books sitting on somewhere sitting on this like little chair table thing that my mom had that later got thrown away and made me very sad because I know there were some Iron Man in there.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty sure there was some Batman in there too, and I have no idea what those books.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, there was definitely some Green
I don't
Lantern.
remember either, but it's like I had, and I was like you. I think my first one was Spider-Man. I had a big giant one. That's all I remember was it was giant, and then I had some other ones that had some Batmans in there. Green Lantern, obviously, Iron Fist and Daredevil. I think I had a couple, and that
those came much later for me.
And I think it was just the visuals appealed to me. But I was a sucker for cover art.
Yeah, and definitely I caught Spider-Man on the Electric Company,
and of course.
And you also have listed here the
high budget, live action and high budget. So high budget, I say it twice. TV experience of the late 70s.
Yeah.
I don't know if it lasted more than a year or two. I don't really remember. And it was not as impactful on me as like Battlestar on television was, but it was definitely one of those things that I wanted to see. It's Spider-Man. And very, very, very true to life. I mean, if you could watch that side to side with one of these newfangled superhero movies, you would be ashamed at the special effects that they use today.
So one of the things that makes Spider-Man so awesome, he is not a billionaire. He is not a playboy. He is not a super soldier from outer space. He's not an incredibly overpowered alien.
And I don't know for a fact, but I'm pretty sure if we looked hard enough, we could probably find a superhero that has all four of those things.
Well,
not a major one, but I'm pretty sure there probably is one in there in the lexicon of DC or Marvel heroes.
I'd bet the closest you're going to get there is Booster Gold. And I think that gets you 3 out of the 4. Because I don't think he's from outer space.
Because really, outside of being those things, which most superheroes were, it was like he was much more relatable to the target audience. He was probably a little bit older than the target audience. He was in high school, a little dorky, but just a kid struggling through high school and then later through college and then obviously as a photojournalist.
Now you take a look at the original art. The original artwork for Peter Parker, the character, looked very, very young, 15, 16 years old.
And that was what he was supposed to be. So really he was right there. He was just that moment away from where you were in life. And I think it's normal for people to feel disconnected in at least certain parts of their life. And the more dorky people like Michael are, the more relatable he becomes because, he was dorky. He was a science kid. He had a straight ruler. He was a weakling before he had superpowers.
Mm-hmm. You're still talking about me, right?
Yeah. Oh, and Spider-Man too, I guess. Yeah. But they're very connected in that way. But the other thing I think too that really, really kind of comes back to it is he's imperfect. He had real flaws. It's like the most powerful story obviously being the one of where he first gets the powers and he's trying to make some quick cash doing it. He lets the criminal go past who goes and kills his favorite uncle.
That is an incredibly powerful creation story for the character because he gets his powers first. Mm-hmm. And then he learns his lesson. That's really what creates Spider-Man is the death of Ben Parker. Even though he'd already has powers and he's already doing stuff with them, even dressing up as Spider-Man. But he didn't truly become Spider-Man until Ben Parker died. And then he got it. The line that has been said a billion times and overused, with great power comes great responsibility. Yes. I can't just be frivolous about this. Even though I could just spend my time making money off of these hot new talents I got, I owe it to the world to do
because sometimes
better.
there are consequences for your actions, and and they could directly impact you or other people.
And your inaction.
Yeah, same thing. Yep. But no, it was one of those things that was a very powerful creation story. And really it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of studying for my other podcast about marketing and this idea of the attractive character. And one of the things that they always push in there is if you create an attractive character for marketing, it has to have flaws. Because people can identify with people with flaws. And the thing is, really, if you got that superpower, are you straight up Superman? I'm sure other people are. Michael and I are not. We're Spider-Man. We're screwing it up. We're in it for ourselves because we're greedy little jerks. And, until we have a...
Well, you
Was
are.
that just me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Michael's Superman.
I'd be a little more altruistic.
Well, hopefully I would be at my age, but especially when I was younger, though, it's like it wouldn't even be intentional. I don't think it's just the natural course of things. Is your first thought is, "Wow, what can I do with this?" And it probably isn't to help people, especially when you're young.
No, it's actually pretty amazing how mature emotionally and morally Peter is about his superhero dumb. And there is a book that was a bit controversial in that Spider-Man, I forget exactly the deal. Dr. Octopus was dying, and I don't know, it was cancer or whatever, but he figured out a way to move his consciousness into Peter Parker and then put Peter Parker into his dying body, and he became Spider-Man for a little while.
That's definitely not a trope.
It's trope, but they played it off so well. It basically got... With him doing it, one of the things that they did was that they talked about how there were latent memories from Peter that were inside his body that Doc Ock now had access to. So now he got to see that Peter carried the weight of the world on his shoulders with all the different little responsibilities that he had, and with as strong as he was and all the things that he could do, he held back and tried to do things the right way. Like he didn't go just, beat his enemies into the ground, even though he could. Like he wouldn't, like he showed a great deal of restraint and maturity in how he went about being Spider-Man. And in that process, Doc Ock became appreciative of his foe and gained a great deal of respect for his foe, not realizing how very much he went through. His Uncle Ben being killed, Gwen Stacy being killed, and all the difficulties that very easily could have turned him into a villain. And he still chose the high road of being morally just. And that is what impressed him the most. And it is what inspired Doc Ock to continue to be Spider-Man and try to uphold the legacy that Peter had created as the character. As opposed to ruining who the character was, that was his original plan. I think. I think it was.
Now, one of the other interesting things, and this is also very akin to Batman, he's typically less powerful than his foes. It's not always true, but most of the time, his foes are more powerful than him, and it's a lot of times not even close. Because Spider-Man, where he has super strength and good agility, and is very agile, he's still underpowered typically in comparison, either because of technology or usually there's one super exaggerated thing that puts them at a higher playing field than Spider-Man. And I think that's an endearing thing because most people feel like that's the way the world's kind of weighted against them. It's like, it's not been fair. The reason you end up where you're at in life is because of, life holding you back because of things you can't control. And, in a way, kind of making him the anti-Superman even though they have similar sentiments at the end where they're both very hopeful characters and they exude hope for the world even through their struggles and tribulation, Spider-Man is typically not as powerful as his foes, where at best Superman's foes are usually at his level, and a lot of times he's stronger than them. It's usually numbers that they use against him.
The thing that's funny that I always think about when it comes to thinking about Spider-Man's villains is the comparison, because it always makes me think of Batman's villains. Batman's Rogues Gallery. He is the most famous character's Rogues Gallery there is.
Yes.
But I would argue that Spider-Man's is a close second, because his is so vast. Spider-Man has fought everybody. He's fought everybody.
And he will fight everyone.
He has gotten into fights, and he will fight everyone. So I like that and I really like the ones that you've chosen to mention here.
Yeah, those are sort of my big ones. But the bigger thing before I get to supervillains I like to talk about is supervillains were never, in good Spider-Man stories, supervillains are typically an extension of a struggle that Peter Parker is having in his life. The battling of the supervillains themselves are almost secondary to the struggles of getting through high school, of getting through college, how to date that girl. And the supervillains, in a way, are an extension of the fears that he has. And so I thought the 5 big ones for Spider-Man, and could be a hugely debated topic. So we'll just kind of go with it and say that they might not necessarily be his top 5 villains, but these are the guys I think that you have to consider his top villains. So start just agreeing with me. And I'll tell you the extension, probably the BS extension I've kind of attached to them in my mind over the years. First is Kraven. And Kraven represents the bullies that you run across in life. The people who are just a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, who will then take advantage and torture you even to make you feel hunted at times.
Good example, Kraven the Hunter. So the next one that we have down on the list is the Kingpin. And in this circumstance, the Kingpin is representing the unknown. What out there in the world is the stuff that, I can't find out yet. Yeah. Stuff that I am worried about because I know there's something coming, but I don't know.
I think that's what's big too, because in good Kingpin stories, the superheroes typically will fight tons of villains before they should just always skip and just go find Kingpin somewhere and just beat him up just in case, because it's usually him. And like after several different fights and several different really tough encounters, it starts to link back to this unknown Kingpin figure, this larger than life figure. Maybe it's like the corporate structure that prevents you from being promoted, the thing that prevents you from being picked first on gym for sports. It's like this unknown thing that seems to be screwing with your life at every faction. And it's really a way our brains use to protect ourselves, to say that there's like this big thing against us, and whether or not there is unimportant. We're going to take it that way. It's like the world sometimes feels against us, and there's some unknown force causing it. And it's in Spider-Man comics, it is definitely that Kingpin guy. This one I really like, and it's Venom. And the note I put down is he's the price of shortcuts. And the ultimate obvious shortcut comparison for Kingpin is steroids. It doesn't necessarily have to represent that, but I think it's funny because his name is Venom, and you typically, when you see the villain Venom, you would see that like, this really huge, bulky, a much larger person than Peter. And the thing is,
and not only larger than Peter, but larger than Eddie Brock, who is under the black.
And the neat thing is too, is because of the origin of Venom, and this will be a spoiler, maybe, probably not for most people who listen to the show, but maybe for some. Venom was originally a symbiotic alien who bound with Peter Parker, and he liked it, and it actually caused him problems because it was the first time he started to be more powerful than his foes.
It started out, it was a nice relationship. like the symbiote wasn't doing anything weird to Peter. It was on him. He could think and change his clothing. So he didn't always have to hide his suit or wear something different, whatever. If he has to go to work, he would think and the suit would change to be his work clothing. And be like, oh, wow, how convenient. And then when he needed to be Spider-Man, he could just think and poof, his suit was the Spider-Man's black suit, the symbiote suit. So for a while there, it was great, but it also enhanced his physical prowess as well.
And shockingly made him more powerful than his foes, which were some very fun comics with Peter just wiping the floor up with people who usually were physically superior to him. And it became an increasing crutch, an addiction. It could be probably a drug, which is why I think steroids is a great analogy. But you can think of it as drugs in general. It's like this thing that you think is making you better, and maybe it is in ways, but there's a huge cost to it. And if you keep going down that path, you turn into this villain Venom. And if you clean yourself up, there's a chance for redemption. It will be tough unless you can find a really large sonic bell. But you can kick it and redeem yourself as well. So it's also for Spider-Man, it's a story of redemption. For Venom, it's a story of addiction.
It's funny that you should say it that way, because if you read Ultimate Spider-Man, which is when they rebooted the universe and they've rebooted Spider-Man's story, and they did it in a really, really great way. The basic thing is that his father, prior to dying, was working on a cure for cancer. He was working with Eddie Brock's father. So they tied Eddie Brock's childhood to Peter Parker's childhood. And they then, being very intelligent fledgling scientists themselves, continued to try to continue the work of what their father started, and they created the symbiote as a byproduct.
Oh, really?
Yes, because there was a tie-in aspect of it. They were trying to do a super soldier sort of thing, and they were also trying to cure cancer. So there was a potential military application for it, which I guess
that's where I was funding it.
I'm
assuming.
Well, exactly. So, and things went wrong and Venom occurred. So, and it was definitely a sort of, danger of shortcuts tale.
All right. And now the next one I kind of like too, Green Goblin. And there are many different takes on Green Goblin, but the original one I remember was Green Goblin was actually almost a kind of a more mystical thing. So it's those bumps in the night that scare you, that you don't know, you can't find the answers to, but they're always there. They literally hover right above you sometimes, or they're under your bed. It's the things that go bump at night, the things that we can't explain, whether it be supernatural or we just can't explain it. But and I guess too, from doing some research, that they took a really long time before they even revealed who the Green Goblin was. And most people assumed who it was, but they never really revealed it for a long time because they're playing up this idea that it's like just this unknown thing that you just can't explain. Not unlike the Kingpin, not like this hidden force of evil, but like just this, like I said, it's more like the monster under the bed. It's another thing that younger kids a lot of times have trouble with nightmares because their hormones are going freaking crazy. Is one of the reasons you get nightmares, and I think Green Goblin becomes a great villain for young comic book people when played that way.
And the first Spider-Man movie, the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, was also a whole tale about puberty. It was all about dealing with puberty and dealing with growing into manhood. So Peter, starts getting his powers. He starts looking more like a man. He sprays gooey white fluid all over his room.
Sometimes on accident.
Sometimes by accident. This is not crude, coincidence. This was an intentional aspect built into the character to imply that one of the big things is that he's dealing with puberty, and they visually display that in a number of different ways throughout movies and
I thought they did a good job too, because Green Goblin being the villain in that movie, they pretty much played him that way, where it's like this thing that horrified Peter Parker, and it's just that thing that everyone has, and it's different for everybody, but everyone has those fears, and Green Goblin are the fears that people have.
For me, it's Jeff's show notes.
That's why he never looks at them.
The fifth one you have down here is Dr. Octopus. And I thought you had an interesting idea here because, again, in the Ultimate Spider-Man version, he and Dr. Octopus start out as friends. That's very common. They actually work together. And the fear here is being crushed by the school system, having difficulty with your
That's
academics.
why I think it's very important to have the two relationships with Doc Ock. You kind of need both there, because you have this one of the school system going well and this mentor educator, who helps you explode and do well in school. But on the other hand, sometimes they become overbearing and they crush down on you. And I think that's probably the more common thing people feel with school, especially when they're younger. It might not even be in all their classes. It might not even be justified, but usually for me it was. It's like you get this crushing feeling from school because for whatever reason, they're coming down on you. And that is Doc Ock.
He was also good friends with
the system cracking down on you.
He was also friends with the Lizard too, who I was hoping would get explored more in the what do you call it?
The animated show? They brought
he was explored.
They brought him back in one of the movies.
He was explored well.
The animated.
Yeah,
I thought
he was explored. He was explored well in the animated show. In the movie, didn't they? Which movie was it? The second set of Peter Parker.
I forget which ones of it. He was in one of the two. It would have either. I don't think it was in the first set. It would have had to have been a second movie, but I think it was in the second set.
I seem to remember not liking it that much. I mean, they were laying the groundwork for it with the Sam Raimi one.
They laid the framework, but I don't think they got into it. And I think that the problem was in the second, reboot, wasn't even the Spider-Man character so much. It's like they were doing so much playing with the camera in 3D that they forgot to make the story.
Yeah, they forgot to make a good movie.
They made a lot of swinging sequences that were way too long just to play around with the cameras and didn't really tell a good story, and it kind of killed it off. I thought the characters were fine and everything, but it was the length of time between discussions and plot that really hurt it.
Yeah. They're doing a lot of things, and I don't think Homecoming is going to make this mistake. I think they're doing it so that they can reboot appropriately. But for a while there, they were doing the mistake, what I'm calling mistake, of taking a character that we all know exactly what their backstory is, and making a full movie or way too much of a first movie all about the backstory. You can just show me a Spider-Man adventure. The whole movie can just be what would be the second movie, adventures in Spider-Man's life, because we know who he is. You know what I mean? Same thing with Batman. Like, you don't need to give me an origin again. Just show me him doing cool stuff.
The one thing I appreciated.
I know where he came from.
The Ben Affleck version of Batman was that they started him as a veteran Batman, not a novice Batman.
Me too. Now, I don't have a problem with them doing what they're doing with the new character, because they're tying him into an existing universe that he wasn't established in. So, them creating a new origin for him, I'm fine with. But it also looks like not a lot of the movie is going to spend a lot of time doing that. It looks like we are going to get a lot of adventure, which that's what I want. I don't want to see him in high school for an hour of the movie. You know, I want to see him out being Spider-Man.
I want this to be like an episode of 90210 where at the end he becomes Spider-Man.
No. Not for me. But yeah, Spider-Man being approachable, I think his most approachable quality is that he's fallible.
Yeah.
He's human. He makes mistakes. He very often loses. He loses fights all the time. Spider-Man, like Batman got to a point where people were calling him Bat God because he could fight and win against anyone. He would have a justifiable reason for winning against something he shouldn't be able to beat because he's human.
It's like,
but that's because
how many times have Batman and Superman battled in comics? I want to see the tally because I bet you at least half the times Batman has won.
Yes, that's true. But it's because he thinks about things and he prepares for things. And that's fun. Like, I like that that's fun. Like, I like seeing that version of Batman. But it doesn't make Batman identifiable because I am not a billionaire genius like Batman.
Who can fight?
Which is to say, I don't have $1 billion, but, you know, the genius part. You know.
Besides that, it's pretty much the same.
However, I was a teenage boy who did not feel cool or accepted. And that's Peter Parker. And Peter Parker gets into fights, and he frequently loses. And again, I think that we all feel like there's times in life where we lose.
And the thing is, because of that, though, it always has the good moral teaching of showing you that persistence pays off. And which is so true. You know, usually we learn more from our failures than our successes. And so the fact that he loses and he keeps getting up and he keeps trying to do the right thing over and over again is probably a good message to send to people, because that would, you know, if people try to act like Spider-Man, superhero stuff aside, but just the same behaviors, the world would probably be a better place. But the thing I think ultimately makes him as a superhero greatly identifiable, because obviously the superhero side people can't identify with, but it's really this one minor change in his life that set him on the path. So it's like all of us, no matter how geeky and dorky we are, no matter how many D20s we've worn out in our life, we're one minor change from being a superhero. Maybe not a perfect superhero, maybe not a billionaire playboy superhero, but we're all just one bite away from being a superhero. And I think that is an attractive thing to him.
We don't look as good in spandex.
We would if the one minor thing happened. You see, you would look good in spandex, which is good.
Always a useful, talent to have.
Yeah, I once walked around town to prove that wrong, and I was dressed in all spandex bodysuit, and I was asking people what they thought about me, and I had to destroy the tape. It really hurt my feelings. But what a great idea is that, though, is making a character that is a little bit older than the audience. You know, and then 95% of the way of of a lot of the good Spider-Man stories, you know, just a little bit older version of the people reading it. But in one way, he's superior because of one minor change. And it was a radioactive spider that bit him, but he didn't almost die. You know, it just suddenly gave him this powers that took him to be at the next level. And I think if anything I've learned from humans in life is we want the easy path. We want the easy button to push at Staples to make our life easier. And if we could have that one easy thing happen, that little minor pest bite, like if I gained spider powers every time I got a mosquito bite in Windsor, I would be super duper powerful. And it is occasionally fun as when they cosmically powered Spider-Man, which gave him, I believe, the powers of Captain Marvel, and which in terms of the Marvel universe is exceptionally powerful.
Yes.
Was probably...
He became Cosmic Spider-Man.
It was, I think, only planned to be a short-run thing, which was good, but it was really fun because like all of these really powerful guys, he just smacked around like nothing. You know, and it was one thing in Venom, he was a little bit more powerful than him, but as cosmically powered Spider-Man, it was just whipping times here.
Yeah. He was crushing everybody at that point, and he was flying around. He wasn't swinging at that point because he could just fly.
Yes.
Just before you said that, I want to step back a moment because you're talking about getting the spider bite and then having powers. One of the mistakes that Peter made, and this later
the ultimate version.
This was an ultimate version. Kraven, in the ultimate version, Kraven was akin to like the Croc Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have his shows, he would do hunting and have the shows. And he decided for like
I had a South
reality
Park vision
TV show
with Spider-Man involved in it there. It was very
good. He had like a reality show where he's going to hunt down Spider-Man. And he goes to, New York, and he goes to find Spider-Man, runs into Spider-Man, and Spider-Man clobbers him, thinking that Kraven's some type of super-powered person. He wears a costume. He's coming to take on Spider-Man. He didn't realize that Kraven's just a normal man, and he almost killed him by punching him. And it shut down his reality TV show right quick. And that went on to, Kraven lost his show deals, lost money. He was, semi-crippled. He then did something to superpower himself up and go back after Spider-Man out of vengeance. And that
created Kraven the Hunter.
That created Kraven's last hunt, the death of Kraven. So, really good storylines.
So, lots of good storylines. So, for the world building task of the week, which we don't normally have in these kind of episodes, go cover your characters for your fictional world in white gooey webs.
Might not make sense. You might have to put a big spider in there.
Just do it. Then for the real world task is go check out Spider-Man Homecoming. It looks like it's going to be a fabulous movie. And actually go read all of the comics that he's ever appeared in. Go watch all of the old movies and TV appearances for next week.
Spent a lot of time doing
which is not nearly as bad as I think the week we made them
quiz.
watch all science fiction ever made. So this could be on par, though.
Yeah, that's okay. Not as bad. Not as bad. But if they watched all science fiction ever made, then they arguably could have already covered all this.
I don't consider Spider-Man science fiction.
He's definitely science fiction. He's right in there.
No, he's just he's superhero, modern day superhero.
So, what don't you think about him being turned into by a radioactive spider is not science fiction?
Because I'm pretty sure if
genetically altered
you
one
were bitten by a radioactive spider, you would not turn into a freaking Spider-Man. I've had that done to me.
Fiction.
No.
Yeah, that's the
I've had that done to me over 40 times.
Science.
Over 40 times I've had that done.
Fiction.
Every year on the anniversary I first saw Spider-Man, I get a radioactive spider bite, and I've only gotten sick.
You are talking science fact. This is the difference between science fact and science.
No, I consider
fiction.
comic book universe in modern day just to be
fiction.
Just to be
lies.
Just to be that. Even Guardians of the Galaxy is not science fiction.
Fiction lies.
It's comic book universe. It's its own genre.
Still science fiction.
No, I'm making stuff up now.
Okay, guys, if you have to get ready for the summer and go buy your summer stuff, please go to www.garduel.com/Amazon for all of your Amazon purchasing summer readiness needs. This will help the show. It doesn't do anything to change your prices, but it absolutely helps us to continue bring you great content like this. So hop on Amazon through our portal and help the show.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builder's Anvil. We would love it if you would share the World Builder's Anvil with 2 of your friends, and so would they. If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting by showing them Stitcher or iTunes, or, best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com. That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.